signed up for the rest of the week, but these guys are doing a good job of singing songs that go hand in hand with what we're going to be talking about in the lessons. And so appreciate AJ, and that was just there's not a more fitting song in the book, I don't think, than the one we just sang about the lesson that we're going to talk about tonight. So appreciate the efforts of the song leaders all week. It was great this evening to be able to spend some time with Mike and Karen and to get reacquainted with them. I didn't know what soups we were going to have, but I knew Karen's got 1,000 recipes for soups. She knows how much I appreciate those soups on a gospel meeting night, and she has not forgotten that. And I appreciated spending time with them, and it's just good to see everybody and to get reacquainted with everyone. As you know, I said Sunday, when you leave a place, not all of you leaves. A piece of you stays. So there's a lot of people that are near and dear to my heart that are here. So it's been a good, encouraging week. I wish the family were able to be here with me a little more often, but hopefully, Lord willing, everybody will be back on Friday. And so we're looking forward, and I'm sure you guys are looking forward to that as well. As we've been discussing, we are going to talk tonight about the heavens declared the glory of God. If you'll turn in your Bibles to Psalm 19. Psalm 19, we're going to go ahead and read through those first 10 verses. The Psalm of David. The heavens are telling of the glory of God. Just stop there for a moment. Now, again, different translations use different words to describe or explain things. And the title for the lesson tonight is The Heavens Declare the Glory of God. But when you read the New American Standard version of this, I think it gives a better picture of what the heavens are actually doing. The heavens are telling of the glory of God. You ever heard someone say, I wish that if God was true, if God was real, that He would just come out and tell me that He's real. That He would just talk to me in some other way. You say that He speaks through His Word. Why can't He just tell me? Why can't He speak in some other way to me and tell me that He exists? And I'll tell you that He is screaming to you that He exists. The heavens are telling you, speaking to you, talking to you, telling you of the glory of God. As we were singing the song that AJ led for us, there is a God. He is alive. Amen. And I'm telling you, there's no more evidence of it than as you're singing, this precious little girl just smiling away. Is so happy to be here and smiling. In her smile, in her face, God is screaming to you that He exists. That He is her creator. That He is your creator. The heavens are telling, the heavens declare the glory of God. And their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. Do you realize that when we look out in the stars at night, that is the purpose that they are there? For no other reason. And their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. It's almost like God saying, you know what, if I create all of this, not just where they live, but outside of where they live, surely they can't deny me. And yet we do, don't we? There are many who deny the existence of God. And He said, but I created everything that you see so that you would see the work of my hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. It is what it is there for. God is screaming to you that He exists. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them He has placed a tent for the sun, which is a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end of them. There is nothing hidden from its heat. The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. We sing this song, right? The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true. They are righteous altogether. Do you see the connection that God is making here? The heavens are declaring the glory of God. Their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. Day to day for speech, night to night reveals knowledge. He's saying everything that I created is speaking to you. And then he goes through these last verses. It says, the law of the Lord, His word, is perfect. He wants you to know that He exists so that you'll read His word. Study His word. He's saying you can't deny that I exist, and because I exist, and I've given you my word, surely you will do what I've asked you to do. That's the connection that he's making in Psalm 19. They are more desirable than gold. Yes, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey and the drippings of the honeycomb. I told you last night, Mark was here and he was doing a study there in Moundsville of Psalm 19, and just some of the things that he brought up got my brain working and my mind churning. And I will openly admit that I am not a scientist. But I will also openly admit that this is one lesson in a series of 9 or 10 lessons that it would take to get through not even everything that we could talk about. So this is just a small sample of what we can talk about when we talk about the heavens declaring the glory of God. You know, I'm amazed that those who can look at the world, at the heavens, and say it happened by chance. It's just something that happened. You know, we're so lucky to be where we are. They see the same evidence that we see, but see it in a much different way. I'm going to tell you a little story here. Basically on August 20th of 1977, I was born in 1977, July 4th, in case you were wondering what to give me for my birthday. It's July 4th. I was born on July 4th, so I'm not very old here when Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 are sent out into the world. And in 1990, basically about 13 years, I was about 13 years old, and on Valentine's Day of 1990, after being sent out from the Earth, on February 14th of 1990, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 were somewhere around Saturn. They made it pretty far. And Voyager 1, as it gets near Saturn, turns around and snaps a picture. And here's the result of that picture. From Saturn, turns around and takes a picture. Do you know what that is? Where you're standing today. That's Earth. In a ray of sunlight, as seen from Saturn. The picture taken from Voyager 1 in 1990, after 13 years of traveling space. What do you see there? Well, how can people see this image? This, as Carl Sagan called it, pale blue dot, and see anything other than the glory of God? Carl Sagan, yes, entitled this the pale blue dot because he saw it and says, look how insignificant we are. When we look at, our world from another planet and we turn around and we look at how insignificant that pale blue dot is. And just called it a stroke of luck that it happened to be in this beautiful ray of sunlight, encompassed by it. You know what I see? How can God think so much of me? Because it does look very insignificant. But no other place in our universe are there people like us. I know they're looking for them. I don't think they'll find them. How can we see it as something that is so insignificant when God has made us so significant? How truly amazing, how special He has made each and every one of us. In Romans chapter 1, starting in verse 18, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth." Do you catch that? It's not that they don't have the truth. He says that they suppress the truth. They hold it down. They keep it down on purpose. It is their aim. It is their desire to suppress the truth and unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them. For God made it evident to them. There's evidence, but they're suppressing it. Now, I will never get an atheist to admit this, but I believe wholeheartedly that there is something inside of every person that desires God, that needs God. They will never admit it, but I believe that it's there. I believe that God put in us a desire for Him because He is our God. He is our Creator. God made it evident to us, evident within us, that He exists. And I believe as human beings we long for that. Even though we maybe use other things or desire other things to try to fill that void. He says in verse 24, "Since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power, His divine nature have been noticed, clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse." On the day of judgment, we will all stand before our Creator. And there is nothing that we'll be able to say, "Well, I didn't know that you were here. I didn't know that you were my God. I didn't know that you were my Creator." No, all the evidence is there. We just have to see it. So I want to talk a little bit about what the Bible reveals about our planet, our universe, screaming to us that He exists. So we're going to have a couple quick science classes here. 3 in particular. Number 1, we're going to go to Earth science. Now, our planet sits in what's called a habitable zone. Some would even call it a Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's just right. There's not too many materials. There's enough materials. It's not too few. It's just right. Not too much oxygen, there's not too little oxygen, it's just right. Right? It's the Goldilocks zone. It's just right. You can see in this picture here, if you move about 5% closer to the sun, all of our water dries out. This is too hot. It all evaporates. We don't have any drinking water, just 5% closer. We can move back a little bit further, but about 20% max. Everything freezes. We don't, again, have any water because everything's too cold. We couldn't survive. Oddly enough, somehow we ended up in the perfect place in our entire universe to be able to live, to exist. Again, it doesn't seem like coincidence to me. There are so many things, and scientists right now count about 20 things that would make a planet habitable. And using conservative estimates of basically each of these 20 things having a 1 in 10 chance of being possible throughout the universe, there's about 1/100th of a trillionth probability that all that would be able to come together. Now, that is not a statistical impossibility or improbability. It is a statistical impossibility. It's not just improbable, it's impossible. What we would need to make it even slightly probable or slightly maybe improbable is 1,000 more of what we already have, right? We have known and assumed billions upon billions of other galaxies out there, like our Milky Way. There are billions of them that are either known or assumed to be out there. We would need at least 1,000 more of what we already have to make it an improbability. To go from being an impossibility to an improbability. Unless someone had their hand in putting us right where we needed to be. Even science will tell us that. Even science will admit, stroke of luck, that we are where we are. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to exist. Was it a stroke of luck? I think God put us where He wanted us to be. In Job chapter 26, Job chapter 26, starting with verse 7. Now, Job is typically in chronology assumed to be around the time of Abraham, as far as the writing is concerned. Some scholars will vary in where to put Job exactly, but many of them will put Job and his writing around the time of Abraham. In Job chapter 26 and verse 7, it says, He stretches out the north over empty space and hangs the earth on nothing. Now, up until about the 1500s, the most well-known scientists believed that the earth sat on the back of some sort of large animal. Okay? So we're not 1500s, right? We're in the, you can say, early 2000s still. 500 years, less than 600 years ago. Just a small portion of our overall history. Just a few hundred years ago, they thought that our world was sitting on the back of a large animal out in space. And yet in 1650, it was discovered, that the earth hangs on nothing. Why are scientists are so smart? All you had to do was read Job chapter 26 and verse 7 to know that our earth hung on nothing. And when it was confirmed, did that cause science to then believe in God? Oh, God must exist. No. More excuses. Came up with more excuses as to reasons why we shouldn't believe. Notice with me, if you will, Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 7. All the rivers flow into the sea. Science didn't always know that. Yet the sea is not full. I wonder why. We've got all these rivers that are just constantly flowing into the oceans. Why don't the oceans keep filling up, filling up, filling up, filling up? Where everything just overflows. Well, he kind of tells you what's going on here. To the place where the river flows, there they flow again. If you look at Amos chapter 9, verse 6, kind of explains it maybe even a little bit better. The one who builds his upper chambers in the heavens and has also founded his vaulted dome over earth, he who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out onto the face of the earth. The Lord is his name. You see that? He calls them out of the sea, right? We know now about evaporation. Right? We know that water evaporates and it rises up. And guess what happens? It gets all cloudy and it starts getting dark. And what happens? God pours it back down on the earth. There's a water cycle. Did you know that the Earth's water cycle was discovered in the 1600s? They finally realized that, hey, it doesn't just keep filling up. That water goes somewhere, it evaporates, and it ends up in our atmosphere. And then eventually it comes back down as rain. And then it hits the rivers and it flows back into the ocean and just keeps doing that. But guess what? Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 7, Amos chapter 9 and verse 6 already told us that. Thousands of years before, if we would just listen. There's so many more things that could be spoken about. I'll go through a few of them quickly. In Isaiah 40 and verse 22, it talks about the circle of the earth. How many of our scientists believe for a long time, some still believe, that our earth is flat. But Isaiah 40 and verse 22 talks about the sphere or the circle of the earth. In Psalm chapter 8 and verse 8, it talks about the paths of the sea. And there was a believing man named Matthew Murray in the 1860s who said, well, if God says there's paths in the sea, there must be paths in the sea. And he set out to find them, and guess what he found? Well, there are paths in the sea. There are routes that are still used today that will take you more quickly and safely if you follow those paths that are in the sea. God's cut them out for us so we can get from one place to the other and get there safely. But it wasn't back in the 1860s. Yet it was written in Psalms. The first and second laws of thermodynamics, and again, there can be many, many lessons on these. The first law of thermodynamics is energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be converted. Right? So we can't create energy, we can just convert it into something. Right? Into something different. Everything that is created is already here. Science tells us that. We can't create anything new, any more energy. We can only convert it into something new. Colossians chapter 1, verses 16 and 17 says, all things are created by Him, and He holds them together. The second law of thermodynamics says that things tend toward disorder. Think about your house. Imagine this. You've got our three boys. There's active boys, as Keith won't say ornery. He says active. So I'll go along with Keith. Our active boys. Can you imagine us leaving them for about 4 or 5 hours one day, just in the house wandering, roaming around? Would that house, when we got back, be in order? You know, Alana used to tease. We would pray sometimes, you know, when we're in services that, you know, might all things be as we left it when we get back home. She's like, can't we pray for, you know, it to be a little more clean when we get back, not how we left it when we ran out? Would our home tend toward order or disorder? Even if there were no boys in the house. You know, we lived in a house that hadn't been lived in for about 2 years. It wasn't spotless. There were some things breaking down. Right? That's what things tend to do. You don't drive your car for 4 or 5 years. Is it probably going to fire right up when you go out to it? Probably not. I don't know much about cars, and it's probably not going to start right up. You're going to have to do some work on it. Things tend toward disorder. That's what the second law of thermodynamics says. Again, in Isaiah 51 verse 6, it says, the earth wears out like a garment. It's wearing out. It's wearing down. It's not getting better. Right? It's wearing down. Science admits that it's wearing down. It's not getting better. And again, you would think with evolution it should get better. But we know that it's not. It's wearing out, it's wearing down, because things tend toward disorder. God created it perfectly, and we ruined it. So it tends toward disorder. What about biology? Again, just look at ourselves for just a moment. Look at the biology. Simply things that have been made. And again, we can look at Romans chapter 1, verses 19 and 20, that explains that to us. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. Just look at at creation. Look at or within yourself, and there is evidence of God. Look at Leviticus. I know that says Deuteronomy. It should say Leviticus. Chapter 17, in verse 11. It tells us there that life is in the blood. You know, William Harvey discovered in 1616 that life is in the blood. That blood carries water and nourishment to every single cell in our body. And even early in American history, some of the greatest minds of the day decided that, well, if somebody is sick, we probably ought to let a bunch of blood out of them. We discovered that's not a good idea. God already told us it wasn't a good idea. Because this is where life is. Your life is in the blood. If you let the blood out of your body, you'll die. And you don't even have to let all of that. Have you ever given blood? You know, I went to give blood one time, and they said, have you eaten within the last 2 hours? And I said, yes. It was about 2 hours ago. They said, you should be fine. And about 2 hours later, I finally got to the place where I was going to give blood, and guess what? I got pretty lightheaded. It never happened to me before. I got pretty lightheaded. And there was a girl that should not have been helping me to my seat. There should have been a big burly man trying to help me to my seat, because if I go, she's coming with me. She's not keeping me up. But she's trying to hold on to me as hard as she can, because I was getting very lightheaded. So they brought me a seat, and I had to sit down because I'd lost a lot of blood in that moment. Now, again, if you've eaten and you know, had some water to drink, everything's usually okay. I'm okay almost all the time. But you just lose that much blood, and it can be harmful for you. God tells us that life is in that blood. And we know that now. But science won't believe God's word sometimes. Look at the law of biogenesis. The law of biogenesis simply states that life can only come from life. Right? I can't take this clicker that I got in my hand and make life out of it. Science. If I told a scientist that, they'd say, you're nuts. You can't take nothing, something that is non-living, you can't take that and make life out of it. And then guess what? They'll tell us that life came from nothing. One of two things had to happen. Either our universe broke a law, and this is a law. These are laws of biogenesis. And a law is not a theory. A law means that this happens every single time without fail. Anytime that you test this, it will be true. Life cannot come from non-life. That is true every time. Science tells you that. So either our universe broke this law once, never to break it again, or a God, a designer, that lives outside of our biology, created us, and put laws in place that we have to obey, that we have to follow, that we can't get around. What makes more sense to you? Again, I know what makes more sense to me. But those are the only two options of what could happen. Either something came from nothing once, broke a law, one time, never to do it again, or someone outside of our universe created it and put those laws in place. Again, I know what makes more sense to me. What makes more sense to you? In Genesis chapter 1, verses 11 and 12, God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit after their kind, with seed in them, and it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, trees bearing fruit, with seed in them after their kind, and God saw that it was good. You see God creating these laws? You got an apple tree, you get a seed out of that apple tree, and you plant that seed, you'll get an orange tree. No, you won't. You'll get an apple tree. That's why, as a side note, when I shudder when people say, oh, that's our son, that's our grandson, he's just sowing his wild oats. What do you get when you plant wild oats? You don't get fruit trees. You get wild oats. Be careful. It's the law of biogenesis. It's a rule. If we sow wild oats, that's what we're going to end up with. If we plant fruit, that's what we're going to end up with. If we plant vegetables, I don't know why people do that, but that's what you'll end up with. Wish we could plant pizza. We can't. Think about that. In verse 21, God created the great sea monsters, every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, after every winged bird after its kind, and God saw that it was good. Verse 25, God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, the cattle after their kind, every creeping thing that creeps on the ground after its kind, and God saw that it was good. It happens again and again and again. Finally, we move to astronomy. Let's go beyond our world for just a moment. God's evidence to us extends beyond this world. We talked about first the habitability zone. Well, there's also a much larger habitability zone, a galactic habitability zone. So we talked about the Earth not being too far, too close to the sun. But if you stretch out even farther into our Milky Way galaxy, you can kind of see where our sun is situated. Now that green shows the only places that life could be sustained. But it can't be sustained in that whole green section, because there's way too much going on in many of these places. We sit in a very small place that is able to house life. It is so small, even within our own galaxy, that it shouldn't be able to be here. It shouldn't be able to exist. If we were closer to the center, there are too many exploding stars. There's assumed a black hole that's there that can swallow us up. If we were too far on the outer edges, there's not enough elements there to even sustain life. Consider the stars in the heavens. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul tells the Corinthians, there is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars, for star differs from star in glory. You know, we didn't figure that out for an awful long time. Because when you look at all the stars with your naked eye, what do they look like? They all look the same, don't they? Or at least many of them look the same. And so there's really, very little way to tell. But God tells us in 1 Corinthians 15 that star differs from star. Even up to about a few hundred years ago, people thought that all of the stars were the same. Now I want you to notice this in Jeremiah 33, in verse 22. It says, as the host of heaven cannot be counted, and the sand of the sea cannot be measured, so I will multiply the descendants of David my servant and the Levites who minister to me. Now hold on a second. I want you to consider this. As the host of heaven cannot be counted, and the sand of the sea cannot be measured. Think about this for a moment. This was written thousands of years ago. Even currently today, with the naked eye, we are only able to see about 5,000 stars. And we can't see them all. They're available to us, but in the night sky, our view of it is small enough to where probably 2,500, maybe 4,500 at maximum we can see. Most of the time, we're in the 12 to 1,500 range that we can see. I don't want to, but I can count to 1,500. Somebody 2,000 years ago looking up, reading this verse, saying, innumerable? Like I can pick up some sand on the beach, and And I promise you I can count the stars in the heavens before I can get through what's in my hand. Right? Pulling out each little piece of sand, a grain of sand, and trying to count it all. I would much rather count the stars. How in the world in Jeremiah does he say, just like the stars are innumerable, just like the sand of the sea? How would he know that? We see it now, right? We understand now again, billions of galaxies that we see and the billions of stars that are out there. We can understand that concept now. 2,000 years ago, it would have been a little more difficult. It was always there. Even in 1543, a man named Nicholas Copernicus proposed a theory that the earth revolved around the sun. See, before then, everyone just assumed that the earth was the center of the universe and everything else revolved around it. He brought forth this theory, and people fought it for around 100 years. So that can't be. Yet it is. And in Luke chapter 17, starting in verse 36, it says, I tell you, on that night there will be two in one bed, one will be taken and the other be left. There will be two women riding at the same place, one will be taken and the other left. Two men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other will be left. You know, if you look at this on the surface, hopefully we understand what he's talking about. But there's this thought or this idea of, on one side of the world, people are going to be sleeping. On the other side of the world, people are going to be working. Again, that's caused because our world is rotating around the sun, not the other way around. It's understood through God's Word that there's night and there's day at the same time. But again, it takes science a little bit longer to figure that out. Listen, there's so much more that we could talk about. And again, like I said, this is one lesson in a series of about 9 or 10 lessons that I could have done. But I felt that this would be sufficient for the meeting. Think about this for just a moment. Not only are we in a place where it's almost impossible for us to be without us being put there, science is also starting to figure out of all of the places in the known universe that we live, or that we could live, you realize we have the best view as well of the rest of the universe. We're right where we are. So not only can we live here, but we can also see better than we could anywhere else in the universe. One case in point is we have full solar eclipses. I don't know of any other planet in any solar system anywhere else in the universe. Science doesn't know of one that could have a full solar eclipse like we have. Because our moon and our sun, while the sun is about 400 times larger than the moon, it's also about 400 times closer. So there's a perfect place for those solar eclipses to happen, where we can view God's majesty in place. We can see further out because of where we're sitting, and there's not much junk, right, in our galaxy. There's not. We have a clear view. We can see further out into space than we could if we were anywhere else in the universe. It is the perfect place to be, not only for life, but for observation of life. We go back to Psalm 19 and verse 1. The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. Don't say that God doesn't speak to us in any other way but through His Word. He is screaming to you from His creation that He exists, that He is your Creator, that He is your God. All of that beauty that we is meant simply to declare to us the glory of God. Is that insignificant? I don't think so. I know that the scientists of the world, Carl Sagans of the world, see that pale blue dot and see its insignificance. But all of those things that are out there are meant to declare to us the glory of God. He's saying, I'm here, I exist, I'm listening, I'm watching, I care. Don't you want to be part of that? I certainly do. And I want you to be part of it too. I want us to be careful though, and sometimes we do this, where we look at it, I'm not saying it's wrong to say this, but just be careful. Boy, the moon is beautiful tonight. Why? Give credit where credit is due. Because oftentimes what ends up happening is, just like Romans chapter 1 talks about how mankind will take those things that are created and begin to set them up and set them apart and begin to worship them. That's for us to see the glory of God. Let's give credit where credit is due. God has made the moon. God has made the sun. God has made the stars. When we look out, when we look over, maybe you've got some property. I know many of you have some properties. I know Mike and Karen in the mountains, and I'm sure they can see it. You look out, what a beautiful view that God has given us. That God has created for us. Don't give glory to the creation. The creation is to declare the glory of our Creator. Be careful not to give glory to the creation rather than the Creator. If you're here tonight and you're not a child of God, you cannot glorify God the way that you should. There is no way for you to glorify God the way that you should if you're not yet a child of His. I've often talk about some of the richest men in the world. If Bill Gates, if Elon Musk, if they die tomorrow, guess how much I stand to gain? Yeah, absolutely nothing. I don't gain anything from their demise because I'm not an heir of them. Are you a child of God tonight? Look at all the glory that God has to offer. And these are just things to declare His glory. He's going to destroy them someday. Like there are so many more things, so many more beautiful things that we have to await for us in heaven. These are things that we look at that God's going to get rid of someday. Even our own bodies, God is going to get rid of someday. I shock people sometimes at funerals when I say, and I said this probably the first time I think I said it was at my grandmother's funeral. And I said, my grandmother did not have a soul. She did not have a spirit. What? Of course she did. No. My grandma is a spirit. My grandma was given a body. She's done with that body. She's still alive in spirit. So even our own bodies, at some point, will be done with it. And there's something much better waiting for us. So all of the beautiful pictures that we see in the night sky, this is just the stuff that God's going to do away with someday. How beautiful is it? How beautiful do you think that eternal creation is going to be? That home in heaven. Certainly we would want to be part of that. If you're not a Christian tonight, I would encourage you to become one. To be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sin. So that we can begin that journey. Being who God wants us to be. We can baptize you tonight, immerse you in water tonight for the forgiveness of your sin. If you are a child of God who has fallen away, maybe lost sight of who our God is, you feel that you need the prayers of the saints here, we're here to pray with you. We're here to pray for you. And we are here to glorify God as best we can. And you can do that tonight by repenting of the sins that you've committed and members here, myself, we will welcome you with open arms. At least that's what we should do. More importantly, God